to the In Transit podcast, a place where we discuss all things supply chain. I'm your host, Vishnu Rajamanikam. In this episode, we are joined by Greg Braun, the Chief Revenue Officer of Dock and Yard Management firm C3 Solutions, to discuss the evolving world of grocery retail in the digital age. Greg and I will explore why groceries took a bit longer to join the online bandwagon and the unique hurdles they face, especially with the surge in online orders. Greg sheds light on the challenges with inventory management in the grocery space and how technology is playing a pivotal role in its transformation. We'll also dig into the challenges of balancing inventory, the impact of omni-channel strategies, and the often overlooked details that can make or break a retailer's success. So buckle up and let's get started. Hey Greg, thanks for joining us on the In Transit podcast.
Well, hey, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Nice to have you here, Greg. How about we start with a quick overview of your journey in the industry and a bit about what C3 Solutions does?
Well, Vishnu, I've been actually in the logistics industry for almost all of my career. Initially, at the beginning of my career, I've always worked in IT to a certain degree. I was working for one of the larger Canadian trucking companies at the beginning of my career, and again working in IT. And then in 2000, I was a co-founder of C3. So we started the whole C3 experience, where, for listeners that know about C3, we're a company a software company that specializes in the area of yard management and dock scheduling. So right now I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for C3. So that's a little bit about my journey.
Wonderful. I had this really intriguing chat in my last episode about retailer challenges in a volatile market like today. But when I think about the grocery scene, it seems a bit steady, at least demand-wise, right? But then I imagine that the challenges aren't in any way lesser compared to the rest of the larger retail market, especially after the surge in online orders, especially after the pandemic. What are your thoughts on this, Greg? What are some of the unique challenges that you see that grocery retailers contend with while catering to online sales?
Well, hey, that's a great point. I mean, and I never thought of that before, but I guess on the demand side, you're right. Groceries have a little less to worry about. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't want to trivialize the competitive challenges that grocers have amongst themselves. But in terms of demand, I mean, we all have to eat. So we know that there's going to be on that side, on the demand side, there's always going to be demand for the products. But also, though, I would say, C3 as a company, we've been providing solutions for the grocery industry right from the outset. So we're fairly well positioned to be aware of those challenges, and definitely from a supply chain end of things, grocers have all kinds of unique challenges, and some of them that come to mind. Obviously, they're dealing with perishable product. So that's a challenge, and it's a challenge in many ways. I mean, if we're talking about velocity of product movement, you've got to make sure that there's no delays in that supply chain. That right from we can get product very, very effectively from the supplier straight into the retail outlets, and there's just because their margins are so small, so narrow, there's just no room for inefficiencies. So I know we are constantly challenged by all of our grocery customers to help them gain efficiencies. And that puts pressure on us as well as a provider to make sure that, our solutions are always available, and we're constantly looking at ways to help our customers improve their efficiencies, not only just from a cost perspective, but also to make sure that we're helping them with the velocity of their product, which has and what I mean by velocity is making sure that there's no delays in that supply chain. So, we help manage one very specific area of it from, say, the point where the product is ordered to the time that gets into the warehouse. That's kind of our specialty. And that is, and almost all of our customers have state of the art systems at all aspects of the supply chain. So yeah, we're dealing with that one little aspect of it. And it's very challenging for our customers, our grocery customers. And now, and it always has been pre e-commerce. They always had a lot of challenges to say, okay, what's that lead time from the point where we order product to the time that it's on the shelf? And that's unique, I would say, in a large respect to grocers. Now you add on e-commerce and things even get more complex, right? So, and there's all kinds of things that when you're talking about omni-channel and so forth, there's all kinds of extra challenges there that apply to grocers. So, I mean, I don't know how much you want to go into detail on that, but, I definitely have a few things to say.
I think we can both agree that the complexities in the grocery vertical is absolutely there. But then it's funny, Greg, because when I think of e-commerce, I kind of instantly think of fashion merchandise or electronics, right? So groceries, probably not so much, at least not until recently. Why do you think it took groceries a bit longer to jump on the online bandwagon? Was it because shoppers are being old-fashioned, or did the logistics of it just make it tricky?
Well, you know what? I think it's a little bit of all the points you just mentioned, because, I mean, I'm of a generation where, I'm still the kind of a person that, and as much as I've totally embraced e-commerce, I think in almost all aspects of my consuming experience, I personally have a bit of a challenge with not seeing the groceries that I buy, at least the produce type of thing, and I think people of my generation share that kind of concern. However, I think newer shoppers, it's less of an issue. But I mean, if we go back though, I think there's a few challenges that, a few reasons why maybe grocers haven't embraced e-commerce as much as some other traditional retailers. I think one is consumer resistance is part of it. Secondly, it's just the complexity of their supply chains. And I already touched on it a little bit. We do have, we're talking about perishable products. We're talking about, they've got established retail outlets already, which, it's been a challenge to say, how do we leverage those and so forth. So that was a challenge that was out there, and it wasn't obvious on how that was going to be solved. Now, we have this massive global event which occurs with the pandemic, where now grocers had no choice but to, and everyone, I think, had a blueprint out there in terms of how they wanted to be able to solve e-commerce. And it wasn't necessarily hurting them, or it wasn't detrimental to the bottom line that they hadn't necessarily embraced it yet. But then with the pandemic, they had no choice. And I know personally, having spoken to a lot of our customers, that is a sentiment that has come out, is that clearly we hadn't embraced it. And there's all kinds of reasons why. Primarily, I think, like we've already mentioned, consumer behavior was one. I think there was just an overriding cost factor, which the retailers were reluctant to get in there. But now they were more or less all pushed into it through the pandemic. So I think they've all, for the most part, a lot of them have gotten there. At least the better ones have gotten there. And again, the sentiments that I'm hearing from a lot of our customers are, and it's that old adage of if it whatever, how's the expression go? It's like, if it doesn't kill you, it's going to make you stronger. That's, I think, what a lot of the grocers are saying is like, yeah, it wasn't easy. We've got to a place now where we are able to provide a fairly seamless e-commerce experience. And it's maybe not something that's contributing a lot to the bottom line, but it is a service that we want to be able to provide our customers, and they're providing it now. And I think a lot of them are doing it fairly well, but it doesn't go without. It hasn't gone without a lot of, I'd say, pain, if you will, but the at the end of the day, I think, like I said, a lot of retailers are there now, and but there are still a lot of challenges that are out there, and I'm sure we'll kind of get into some of the, we can touch on some of the areas which are probably a little bit more sensitive than others.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you in the sense that, these are services that once you create it and once you've put it out to the consumer base, it's nearly impossible for you to take it back, right? So even though
Yeah.
pandemic made these retailers to, come into online sales, probably aren't getting the same amount of sales that they expected now, especially after things have opened up, but they still can't take it back because they've put it out there. And that's kind of like the thing with omni-channel, right?
Yep.
So I wanted to discuss a little bit about the entire impact of omni-channel and online shopping on not just the traditional grocery retailers, but as such for the grocery vertical, right? So you see that right now with consumers buying online, they want everything at the moment they order. There's a lot more packaging involved for retailers, and also the handoff experience is considered super crucial. And even though this is true of most of retail, the grocery last mile is kind of trickier. Like you have more items on average per order, which means it takes a lot more time to pick in the warehouse. The
Yep.
margins of error is less, considering the delivery time windows are way shorter. So my question about the fulfillment process here is, how challenging are the conditions today when, let's say, compared to before, when traditional grocery retail was probably dealing more with the B2B side of things?
Well, I mean, omni-channel has introduced, especially on the fulfillment side of things, has really added an extra a level of complexity to grocery operations, and it's and there's a, I'd say, I mean, and please, I mean, I'm not a grocer, so I can't talk to this from my own, it's not my necessarily my expertise, but from my point of observation, I mean, and again, from the feedback that I'm hearing from our customers, there's a couple key areas where it's really made things much more complex. I mean, if you look at omni-channel, I mean, clearly now inventory management is something that becomes more challenging, because now you're effectively looking at combining what was, traditionally warehouse management was where inventory was the main inventory that you needed to kind of worry about in terms of fulfillment was in the warehouse. So that was fairly easy or easier to manage, I should say. But now when you're looking at e-commerce or an omni-channel perspective, the accuracy of store inventory becomes so crucial. So that's, I guess one aspect that makes a major difference. And if you look at traditional e-commerce providers, they don't have that challenge. I mean, their inventory is pretty much all in one location. The grocers have that additional challenge, if you will. I think picking, you mentioned picking. I think the whole picking and packing is that whole function, again, is much more complicated now. So even if you were just running a pure e-commerce grocery operation, your picking function now gets, if you were used to picking in more of a bulk context where you're sending out orders to stores, that's really, that's totally different from picking for individual orders, right? So that's a whole different way of looking at things and adds all kinds of complexity. Another thing which, again, traditional retailers have had to deal with this, especially online retailers have always had to deal with reverse logistics. And for a large part as well, just regular retailers as well. I mean, reverse logistics was pretty much a normal part of their operation. Grocers, it wasn't nearly as much of an issue, right? You wouldn't have, especially, you wouldn't have inventory filtering back to the warehouse from stores and so forth. Whereas now, grocers are having to deal with reverse logistics. And that's a whole new aspect of things which was never there before. I think one of the main areas as well is the overall velocity aspect or speed of inventory movement, and that's one thing that C3 as a supplier is. I think that's one of the areas where we've really been challenged by our customers. So, if you look at that market, the online consumer really is expecting, they're looking at rapid fulfillment of their orders. And their people are, obviously in grocery, they're looking at same day, at the worst next day type deliveries. So that really puts pressure on the retailer to really streamline the warehouse operations. And so that's pushing a lot of them to do things. And I was recently at a conference where it was a conference kind of related to grocery. And again, one of the key topics was robotics and automation. So it's an area where, the more that you embrace e-commerce, the more that you have to just get more and more efficient. I mean, you have to streamline operations at all levels. So again, these were always concerns in the industry, but now they're just getting pushed to the nth degree. Another area, again, where C3 has a certain level of involvement is the overall shipping and last mile delivery. I mean, and again, that was not as much of a concern with the grocery world in the past. But now there's all kinds of challenges in terms of how do you coordinate your logistics providers with the combination of store deliveries versus direct consumer deliveries, and curbside pickup, all these kind of things, which are again unique to grocery and things that they've had to, and they have for the most part totally embraced. And to the benefit of their overall offering. So yeah, that clearly doesn't, I don't think that, gives you an overall, completely encompassing answer, but I think it touches on some of the challenges on how omnichannel has really added a lot of complexity to the grocery world.
Completely agreed, Greg. Completely agreed. So I actually want to focus and dig more into the inventory management side of things that you just touched upon. I believe that, the time to turn inventory is a lot shorter in the grocery vertical compared to other regular retail verticals, right? So since C3 specifically works in this domain, can you explain what goes into managing inventories that have shorter shelf lives in grocery, like perishables, for instance?
Well, I can tell you how, again, from our world, what, as I mentioned at the outset, C3, we provide essentially a dock scheduling solution and a yard management system. These are both solutions where they're very much needed in the grocery industry. And some of the ways that we help on this whole end of things is the fact that, again, and grocers are very unique in the fact that when they're building a schedule, it has to be very strategic. And so what I mean by that is, it's absolutely pertinent, or it's mandatory for them that they make sure that certain product is delivered at particular times of the day, and that's needed because they need to be able to ensure maximum throughput, because they know that there's certain aspects of the operation which are more conducive to certain products flowing at that time. They need to be able to really prioritize certain products. So, for example, in in a typical operation, if you're not very well organized on an appointment side of things, it's really difficult to be able to say, oh no, because everybody wants to deliver their product as quickly as they can, right? So, if you're receiving requests for appointments manually, it's who knows what can have an influence on that. It could be favoritism. It could be what's most convenient. Whereas when you automate that function, and now, vendor or carrier comes online, once we identify the product they're delivering to us, and we are able to establish a priority for that product, it's the system which is going to strategically establish when is the optimal time for that product to come in. So now it no longer depends on, did this the order taker or the person receiving the call, did they remember this or that, and so forth. So that whole aspect of making sure that now we're not building we're building a schedule which is optimal for the operation, so that we're making sure that we're giving ourselves an opportunity to streamline things as much as possible, and then also being able to respect the priorities of the business. So we've got promotions going on. These are the products that we need to be able to get through the warehouse as quickly as possible. We've got perishable goods. This is how we have to, these are the special kind of conditions we need to make sure that product gets through the warehouse as quickly as possible. So those are some of the things that we're able to help on. Then on the yard side, now so it's one thing to set up the schedule. Now once the vehicles, the carriers arrive, again, it's absolutely crucial that based on the type of goods that are arriving, that we're able to not only just receive those trailers or those vehicles, but actually get them turned around as quickly as possible, right? So we're able to know that, okay, this is a product, this is a trailer that has priority goods on it. We know exactly where they need to be received. We know that and already now the receiving crew is ready for them, because we've been able to establish in advance that, hey, they're coming in on this appointment. And we also, recently we've introduced a product which allows our customers to actually get advanced visibility on when the driver is really showing up, even if they're a third-party driver where you're not necessarily hooking into their technology. So the driver is able to indicate, yes, I'm here, I'm on my way, so that now we can really, really optimize the receiving of that product. So there again, that's very crucial. There's all kinds of factors, and I outlined some of the biggest challenges that grocers have. But really, where we add value is just making sure we maximize that velocity. First of all, we have that strategic plan that makes sure that we're actually receiving the goods at an optimal time. And then once they do arrive on site, that we're able to recognize that, A, they're here, and we're able to direct them to the right location, and unload them as quickly as possible. Oftentimes when we're talking to just general customers about, there's certain efficiencies, for example, to be had in the yard. And I think everyone has most operators all have kind of common challenges in that regard. We want to do things, do as much as we can with the least amount of resources. But in the grocery industry, it's also just very critical to make sure that we do that as quickly as possible. Just from that whole velocity aspect is so important in grocery. And, there's many factors which go into it. And I've just kind of indicated some of the key ones that we're involved with, and I know very closely because it's something we deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Makes sense. That's pretty comprehensive, Greg. I want to discuss, I see that based on what you've just explained, how, how the processes work together. I see that balancing inventory as such kind of, sounds like walking on a tightrope. Like, you don't want to have too much of it, nor do you want to risk running too low on inventories, right? So how do grocery retailers strike that balance? Like, with obviously omni-channel becoming bigger and bigger every year, it's probably going to add another layer of complexity to warehousing and inventory management, right?
Definitely, yep. Well, it's a balance that, and that balance is going to be more and more of a challenge, because as you indicated, it's such a fine line between keeping lean inventories and making sure that you've always got availability. You never want to have stock out. So again, I'm not an expert on all these different points, but clearly there's going to be a need for better demand forecasting. That's going to be very, very important. Just overall better inventory management is going to be key. And especially in an environment where you've got decentralized warehousing and you've got stock in your actual stores as well. That's clearly going to be a big challenge. I think more and more that advanced visibility or real time kind of monitoring is going to be be an issue. But I mean, again, the points where say C3 is involved with the most is just this whole helping our customers kind of build as flexible a supply chain as they can. And that again requires agility. So, are you going to be able to, are you able to be agile in the way that you deal with inventory? And again, I've just discussed on how some of those things are impacted, like from the point where the point that the product is ordered till the point that it reaches and you plan on how you want to bring it to the site. Once it gets on site, how do we make sure we get it into the warehouse? And then there's the whole warehouse function, which is again incredibly complex. But those are some of the aspects, and more, I guess, there's managing suppliers, which is a big challenge, and that that includes obviously all the different relationships between suppliers and the different carriers and what have you, to make sure that again that there's an effective way of creating platforms, I guess, where as part of that demand forecast is collaborating more with suppliers as well, to make sure that they're aware of how their kind of inventories or their what giving them visibility, I guess, in terms of how much inventory is on hand and so forth. So I mean, again, I definitely don't have all of the answers. I mean, or C3 as a company doesn't have all the answers, but we're seeing more and more of this evolution, and I guess what we're doing is just trying to contribute as much as we can on the areas that I mentioned earlier, in terms of saying, hey, how can we make sure that we're expanding visibility as much as possible, and we've recently done that. As I was saying, how as much as we're helping build those very strategic inventory or receiving plans, we're also trying to give more visibility in terms of where is that inventory now. It's left the shipper, it's arrived at the facility, now it's potentially waiting in the yard. Like, how can we minimize those delays and so forth? So, and again, you combine that with, we've already mentioned the challenges with omni-channel, whereby you've got you have to kind of deal with the multiple inventory points, so that now your sales inventory, your store inventory has to be so accurate, so that you can again ensure that when a customer orders product, that it's actually going to be available. So yeah, there's a lot of challenges there, and it's not going to be easy. But like you said, it's going to be more and more important, I think, that for grocery retailers, if they're going to make this a success, because I think for a lot of them right now, especially, e-commerce is a bit of a lost leader for them. Again, that's what I'm hearing from the industry, is that it's something that they're not necessarily making money with now, but it is definitely, from a customer service end of things, something they have to be able to provide their customers. I mean, all of the retailers, grocery retailers, they want to be able to maintain that customer loyalty. So if you've got a great customer, they're coming to your retail stores, you also want to be able to provide them that, online service. And that's something, if they're going to make that more viable, they're going to have to deal with these types of issues, like you just mentioned, in terms of that balance between lean inventory and avoiding the stockouts and so forth. So it's a big challenge for sure. And it makes our life even more challenging also.
Of course. Great. Now take us back a bit, Greg. So imagine a grocer who's been selling only from their store for ages. How do they transition to the online scene? Like, what changes for them, especially on the back end? So on the inventory and yard management side of things, when, what do they actually have to transition on?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, there's a lot of points that there's a lot of different steps that are going to be needed here. But to your point, I can kind of explain what I think's needed in terms of the areas that we look after, because it might probably be beneficial to explain what you don't want to do if you want to get to that. If you're a traditional grocer right now and you haven't made the step to go to to e-commerce or omni-channel, what do you want to make sure that you're doing well? Because again, there's multiple steps. But some of the things that are really things that you need to kind of avoid are, and again, we see this still all the time, and a day doesn't or a week doesn't go by that I don't talk to a grocer, whether they're a regional grocer or even national grocers, and find out that for the most part, areas like I've talked about with the appointment scheduling or the yard management, these are still functions which are very much manual. So to think that you're going to be able to build an e-commerce strategy on a base where you're dealing with complete manual operations, I think that would be a good starting point to say, hey, look, there's a lot of challenges we have out there to be a credible e-commerce retailer. What are some of the things we want to be able to attack? Some of the low-hanging fruit to say, look, we've at least automated that. Now we can move forward. That's where I can contribute and say that, look, definitely you need to be able to leverage solutions, like simple solutions that are out there. And what we always say, and again, we see a day doesn't go or a week doesn't go by where I don't see this, is that retailers don't come to me and say, hey, I've already got this fairly decent or fairly well automated planning tool. I just want to get a better solution. They're coming to me and they're saying, we're actually receiving phone calls from our vendors or carriers, and we're manually kind of trying to build schedules. I mean, that should be seen as a non-starter. You can't run things in a completely manual fashion like that and expect to be able to say, hey, I want to be an e-commerce vendor. And that also applies to the yard. And again, the yard is another area where it's extremely rare, like almost never happens, where someone says, yeah, I've got an automated solution, but I just want to be able to upgrade it and get to the next level. That's not what we deal with. We deal with companies calling us and saying, I right now have my yard drivers, they have walkie-talkies in their trucks, and they have clipboards and a pen, and they're writing down move requests that they get from whoever in the operation. So so that's how a lot of operators, and grocers included, that's how they work today. So again, you can't expect to maximize your inventory flows or reduce that or increase the velocity of these types of things if you're running in a completely manual operation. It's not going to happen. So in this particular regard, and these are relatively simple solutions, I would say the first step you would need to do is have a system that's going to help you build a fairly strategic receiving plan so that now you can avoid things like dropping trailers unnecessarily. You can make sure that, again, you've got you prioritize good, products based on all kinds of aspects within the business. It might be promotions, it might be perishability of the product, so that you've got this strategic receiving plan. And then from there as well, you've got to make sure that within your yard itself, because almost every grocer, and this is something we see across the board, their yards are fairly complicated. And that's just due to the fact that, you've got any large yard, grocery yard, is you're going to have multiple different types of commodities you're receiving, whether it's frozen, fresh, or just regular dry product. So you've got probably warehouses with multiple chambers and so forth, temperature chambers, I should say. So you've got a fairly complex site to begin with. Now you need a system to manage that. Like if you're going to expect to kind of provide the levels of inventory velocity and so forth that we talked about at a base, you've got to automate some of these key functions. And then once you've done that, obviously there's all kinds of other systems on the back ends in terms of inventory management and so forth, which are going to be required. But my advice would be to say, hey, let's get those base functions resolved first, and then we can move on to other areas, which are obviously very, very important as well. But, these are kind of essentials. And again, it's really tough to grow an operation if it's completely manual. Let's automate these things, relatively simple to do, relatively inexpensive, very good ROIs on that. I mean, especially in the grocery business, your return on investment is going to be months, not years. And it's going to allow you to grow into a lot of these other more sophisticated systems as well.
Absolutely. I think all this automation and investing in technology would also help level the playing field, right? For SME grocery retailers who are looking to try standing up to the might of the bigger players in the market. So, thanks for that, Greg. It was wonderful talking to you. Lots of wonderful insights through the conversation.
Well, hey Vishnu, it was my pleasure. I hope I haven't kind of been jumping around here too much, but I hope your listeners have found this useful. I mean, for me, it was. I enjoyed the conversation. It's something that it might come across. I'm a bit passionate about all this stuff, but yeah, it's been a great chatting with you, and thanks again for inviting me.
This wraps up another episode of the In Transit podcast. To learn more or to hear previous episodes, check out our website at semr.com/podcast/all or check the podcast segment on thelogisticsreport.com. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful day.